Hello folks and welcome to today's live stream. My name is Sarah Lean and I'm a Senior DevOps Advocate at Octopus Deploy, and thank you for joining us. Today we have a panel to discuss hybrid cloud and the future of hybrid cloud. So please do put your questions in the chat box and we will definitely get to them because we do want this to be an interactive show. However, first of all, I want to do a round of introductions with my panel as I'm joined with fantastic people today. So Jeff, hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Jeff Woolsey, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft, focused on hybrid cloud. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Derek, welcome. Hello. How you doing?
Hello, I'm Derek Campbell. I'm also known as DevOps Derek, and I'm the Principal DevOps Advocate at Octopus Deploy.
Awesome. And last but by no means least, Lior, welcome. Hello.
Hi, everyone. Lior Kamrat, Principal Program Manager in the Azure Arc Platform team. Nice to be here.
Excellent. So that's going to be our panel today. So any questions, do put them in the chat box wherever you're watching and we'll put them to the panel and start to discuss them. I guess the first question we probably want to address is, what does hybrid mean, or what is hybrid? Does anybody want to tackle that question?
Jeff, you want to start and I'll coattail?
That sounds great. Let's go ahead and let's tag team this. So hybrid is pretty much the operating model most companies now are moving towards. And hybrid basically is, we believe that, customers are saying there are things that we want to run on in the cloud, and there's a set of workloads and apps and resources that we're going to continue to run on premises. And we really want customers to tell us they want to take the best advantage of both. There's things and services and capabilities that the cloud has to offer that are extremely difficult or maybe even completely unavailable on premises. There's also reasons why people need to run things on premises, whether it's data sovereignty, whether it's compliance, regulatory, low latency requirements. There's a whole host of reasons why things are going to continue to run in both. And quite simply, hybrid is taking advantage of the best of both and continuing to operate in that model. And we'll dive into that further today.
To me, when I get asked this question, I always like to take folks to memory lane and start with, before hybrid was what it is today, and the things that Jeff was mentioning, and a lot more. Hybrid was always considered to be somewhat of a network-related architecture or an implementation. We used to think that either site-to-site VPN or ExpressRoute equals hybrid. I think that fast forward in a few years, we all know that this is not the case anymore. To me, when I get the question around what hybrid really means, to me, it all boils down to the control plane. It all boils down to how do you take an operational model that you have in whatever cloud provider that you have today. Obviously, we're here to talk in the context of Azure. So if you're taking that operational model that you have today in Azure and using Azure, or Azure Resource Manager as the operating system of Azure, and you're thinking about how do we take that operating system and stretch it to your environments? How do we stretch it to the other cloud providers that you have workloads on? To me, that's the concept of hybrid. How do you take a control plane and bring it to outside of your main Azure environment in that context? So to me, that's hybrid, and obviously we'll dive deeper into that.
And I would say the control plane is absolutely 100% agree. And I would say that we can go even a step further. It's also the ability to deploy services and applications consistently across distributed infrastructure. And yes, the control plane is what makes that a reality. If there's anything that's interesting is when I talk to customers about hybrid, I've actually been taking a poll for every year now for, 7, 8 years. And if I go back in time, and go back to 2014, 2013, back there, and I remember asking people distinctly, you have 3 options. You're going to go 100% public cloud, you're going to go 100% private cloud, or hybrid. What would you tell me? And back then, it was like, you'd probably see as high as maybe 60% say, oh no, we're going to stay all private cloud. We're not doing that public cloud thing. And then you'd see like, you'd see maybe, 20, 30% would say, oh, we're going to do all public, and you'd see hybrid. And what's happened over the years is I continue to ask the same question, the same exact way. And it's clear now for the last 2-3 years, the answer has been exactly the same. There is nobody in the, oh, we're going to do everything private. That's gone. It's just gone. Nobody does that anymore because they realize, no, that's crazy. I'd be missing out on the benefits of the cloud. And so that's gone. Then you have the all public cloud. And that does exist. It's a really, really small percentage. And who is that? That's startups. That's companies that have no legacy at all whatsoever. If you're a brand new organization, yeah, great. I totally get it. Do everything in the cloud. You don't have anything legacy to take with you. But if you're an organization that's been around 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and you've got all of this data, all of this customer environment, all of these capabilities, all of these apps, all of this infrastructure, you're not going to throw that up in the cloud. Even if you wanted to. I remember talking with a huge telecom. He said, Jeff, even if I decided tomorrow I wanted to move everything into the cloud and everything we started building was in the cloud, it would take me 20 years to do it, just considering how much we have. And so hybrid really is the operating model, this operating model going forward, and we believe it's a durable state. And so again, it's one of the reasons I'm excited to be here today to talk about it, because I think the notion of are we doing hybrid or not, that's gone. Everyone pretty much agrees we're doing hybrid. Now, how do I do it in a rational, sane, and consistent way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point, what you're saying, that it kind of fits a lot of scenarios, because I wondered if hybrid suited certain industries or certain types of businesses, or like you say, the legacy model where you've got tons of technical debt kicking around. But I guess it can apply to anybody regardless of what your scenario is, whether you have 2 servers, 300 servers, or whatever it is. Is that a correct assumption to make then?
I would definitely say yes. I've seen this from small, medium, all the way up to high-end enterprise. For the most part, small and medium business is kind of looking at, what, do I even need any infrastructure anymore? Like the days of a small, medium shop running their own Exchange servers, nobody wants that level of complexity and management. They're like, look, I'm just going to move that to M365. Microsoft, you take care of the mail for me. Sure, I'll govern who has permissions and stuff like that, but you guys can handle the mail. So there are some applications that we just see moving pretty rapidly to the cloud. Every so often you'll run into some law firm or a government or something very special that says, no, we actually need to run our own mail. I'm like, okay, well, that's why we still make Exchange, because guess what? Those folks are out there. Yeah. But we see a lot of the small folks looking at, hey, can I move my SharePoint, my web, and everything up there to the cloud? But then every so often you run into a small that says, well, I'm a coffee shop, or I'm a small services company, and my connectivity is kind of intermittent. It's not trustworthy. So I'm going to keep running my my important services things continue to run on premises. And then when you get to enterprises are very much they're kind of looking at this holistic and trying to figure out, how do they rationalize their infrastructure? Do they want to keep buying, tons and tons of hardware and keep managing? And it's not just the hardware. Everyone gets kind of fixated on the hardware costs. It's the management costs. It's the OpEx costs. And that to me is what makes the cloud so amazing. When we say, if you look 10 years ago, what did we do? Well, you install a bunch of Windows servers, you install System Center, maybe you install HP's management servers, maybe you install Lenovo's management servers, maybe, everybody had their own management services. And so now you install all of these management services, you set it up, configure it. You need a whole bunch of hardware, you need a bunch of databases, you need a bunch of agents, you have to manage all of that. And then we release an update. We go from System Center 2012 to System Center 2012 R2 to System Center 2016. And every time we do this, you have to update all of this. Yeah. And you have to update the infrastructure and update the management, and nobody factors in those costs. And once you start doing that, you realize, wow, wait a minute, I have a team that's sole job is just to keep the life cycle of my management services running. What if I could take them off of that and actually help us with the new applications that are making our organization successful? What if we could manage all of this from the cloud? What if we could monitor it, we could patch it, we could update it, we could, log analytics? What if we could secure it, all of this from the cloud? Oh, and by the way, when new features come out, we just light them up for you. When Leor has delivering some new capabilities, guess what? It just lights up. Yeah. We just update it, you get it. You don't have to deal with all of that, day-to-day lifecycle management.
I am known from my features when they're lighting up just like that.
I feel like you have just described my 2014. I actually moved from London over to Melbourne to start up a hosting business, and we were traditional on premises. So we had, your distributed data centers. That was always fun, going and replacing hard drives, right? And so what basically happened is the team was really growing and expanding. So one of the things I did was, hey, Exchange, right? I was fed up at 3 o'clock in the morning, someone shouting at me because Exchange is down again. And yeah, so the first thing I did was like, hey, Office 365. That wasn't something I was particularly passionate about. Like Exchange is great, but it's not super interesting. But then what happened is I actually moved over to Melbourne, and it was like, then I was like, yeah, okay, let's do this. Let's start going looking for data centers. And then obviously, data centers are expensive, but in Australia, they're the most expensive thing ever. The cost of, square foot, compared to the UK was something like 10 times the price. And
Whoa.
then, yes, it was.
Don't they have a lot of land in Australia?
Yeah, but they're only living about 1% of it. So that's the thing, right? Like it was like, wait a minute. So I moved out in September 2014. And then I got an invite to attend a session with Scott Guthrie. And what do you know? Australia is now Azure, now has Azure. So at that point, I was kind of forced to, because we had our servers on premise, old school, hey, let's have test, UAT, etc. on prem. And then at that point, it was like, right, let's use Azure because it doesn't cost £1 billion per square foot. So that's the thing, with hybrid, it generally also allows people to focus in on the more interesting work as well. Because, yeah, Exchange was fun at the time, but once you fixed it about 20 times, it's like, hey, I could probably be doing more interesting things. Let's be honest. And that's where Azure and DevOps and everything all kind of kicked off. Once I could actually focus my energy on other stuff that wasn't the BAU stuff. So yeah, that's the thing. Hybrid is the future.
Derek, that's the way to think about it. You shouldn't be thinking of it that, you're thinking about it as how can I take advantage of innovation to make us more productive, to make us more efficient? Our jobs change. 120 years ago, we rode around on horses. 100 years ago, we rode around in cars. And those cars all had cranks on the front to start them up. Okay, then we got the internal combustion engine. Then we actually had ignitions and starters. Now we're at electric cars. We have progressed over the time. I look at IT, and a lot of challenge with the cloud is trying to get all the awesome folks in IT, the folks that are in the trenches. By the way, I love these folks. I cannot thank them enough, because during this COVID, those are the folks that have been keeping organizations going. Okay, and I was just at Dell Technology World in Las Vegas, and I started off my session by saying, hey, how many of you guys are like working the trenches? And like 80% of the hands went up. I'm like, you guys are all heroes. Okay, because during this COVID, you have had to figure out how to make your organization run. You've had to, I'm sure you found all of the cracks in your remote and your hybrid work and stuff like that. And you've had to plug all of those cracks, and you've had to change and modernize. Okay, well, this should be the way you think about your career as well. Like I said, 20 years ago, everybody installed their own Exchange server. 10 years ago, everyone was, latest versions of Exchange. And now we should be thinking about it a little bit differently. You should be thinking, if you're an IT professional, you don't want to just say, I'm the virtualization guy or I'm the on-prem guy. You need to be the hybrid cloud person. You need to be the person that says, yes, I'm comfortable in the Azure portal. I know how to use Azure Monitor. I know how to use Azure Log Analytics. I can go through eventing. I can set up Arc. And by the way, through the Azure portal, I'm managing all my Azure resources as well as my distributed on-prem. And it could be one data center, it could be one office, or more likely it's lots of distributed offices. And for the first time ever, you now have the ability to see your entire digital estate in one console. For the last 10 years, a lot of people have been talking about, single control plane or a single pane of glass. Sorry, single pane of glass is what everybody's been saying. And it's like, as an industry, now we really haven't done it. Well, that's what we're doing right now. That is what Azure is exactly what we're doing, is we are making it that control plane so that you can manage everything, where it's traditional apps, whether it's VMs, whether it's containers, whether it's, lifecycle management. Lior, jump in. I feel like I'm stealing your thunder here.
I'm not a thunder guy. I think that for me, it really boils down. A lot of the time when I'm having these conversations around Arc, so right now these days I'm focusing a lot on the developer story and how does that look like. Yes, I'm with you. I think that the folks from the IT, and many moons ago, I was one of those as well. And I think that to me, it really, I started to think about this when I started working on Arc about 3 years ago, something like that. I started to think about, okay, so I mean, how does that really impact the business? And it always brought me back to the notion of how we actually addressing developers, because they're the one that actually creating the logic of the business. I want to say, again, not taking from anyone else, but I'm just saying that they're the one that eventually developing that interface that you're interacting with as a customer, with whatever service that may be that you're trying to find. And I think that to me, Azure Arc and the hybrid motion is really what I'm trying to get to is how does a developer story will look like, a year from now, 2 years from now, when we're going to be at a situation where things are much more established. Obviously, technology is becoming more and more mature. Jeff, like you mentioned, horses, 120 years ago, spaceships probably 5 years from now. But to me, it's really about, okay, how does that story is going to look like? And what we're doing today is we're trying to take this notion of the stretch control plane and trying to understand, okay, so if I'm a developer, how do I take advantage of some of this stuff? And I think that in the context of developers and cloud native or microservices, not trying to throw a bunch of buzzwords into the conversation, but I am thinking about, okay, so if I'm a developer and if I'm a developer in the cloud native space, okay, how do I take advantage of some of this stuff? And I think that this is where the story of the IT pro and the developer is starting to jello, because one person is providing the lights, another person is actually turning up the switch. And I think that if you're looking at Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes, for example, or if you're looking at Azure Arc enabled data services or machine learning or app services, this is where the story of extensions, the extensibility model comes into place. Because if you're thinking about Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes just for a second as a fundamental building blocks for all this stuff, when you can Arc enable those Kubernetes clusters, doesn't matter if it's a GKE cluster, AKS HCI, doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that if you can have those Lego blocks that lights up certain capabilities, so for example, GitOps or certificate management or secrets management with Key Vault, or Open Service Mesh for service discovery, TLS mutual connectivity, blue-green deployment, stuff like that. Or if you're looking at Azure Arc enabled data services for state store backend technology, like these type of stuff are the things that starting to click for the DevOps and up the stack, the developer audience. So these are the things that I'm focusing more these days, because I feel that we're getting into a point that with Azure Arc enabled servers, the maturity is starting to be much more aligned to what we have today with Azure VMs, right? And what are the use cases for those? And I think that this is really, things are starting to be more and more interesting as we're going up the stacks and the personas that are actually thinking about hybrid as the operational model. And this is the things that I really find interesting.
Hey, Lior, let's drill into this for just a second. Is that okay, Sarah? Do you mind if we do that?
You go.
So, I was at a conference recently, and I was working the booth, and I did sessions, and the area I was asked about most was Arc. And Arc does two things, and people are pretty aware of the first one, which is it's a bridge. It's for the Azure ecosystem of services, so that you can, you have a way to run on a variety of hardware and devices. And then the second one is about the operations and security model, using Azure to basically manage your monitoring. But this development point you're bringing up is an excellent point, because I realized something. Apparently nobody knows this. Azure Arc does two things, and we've been really good at talking about management and operations and security and stuff like that. And we've been pretty lousy about explaining the developer side. So let's talk about this for a second. One pattern we have seen consistently is as developers have been writing new applications for the last few years, they've been doing it to containers. Okay, they've been going kube. They're doing their K8s. They're loving it. They're thrilled. Developers are doing it. They push out their containers, and what they do is they end up, usually pushing them up to AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. They don't have to manage any infrastructure at all. They just point their container up there, and it just runs. And it runs every single time, and they are thrilled and pleased as punch. They got their CI/CD pipeline set up. They got their GitOps actions set. They've got their automation. Everything is just fantastical.
Sprinkles with some unicorns on top.
Yeah, with unicorns sprinkled, and sprinkles and M&Ms for good luck as well. And then what ends up happening is somebody in the organization goes, "This is awesome. We love this. Except we need to run this on-prem too." And that's where things come to a screeching halt. And this is where I've had a lot of customer conversations where they go, "We weren't sure what to do. So guess what? Kubernetes is free. So we just downloaded and installed it ourselves, and we'll just manage it." And, they think everything's going to be hunky-dory, fine and dandy. And then they realize, short order, oh no, this is constant care and feeding and patching and management, all of that.
I think this is exactly what I meant when I said that this is the Jello connection between IT pros or administrators and DevOps and developers specifically. And just kind of open a branch here for a second. I saw the other day there was a company. You were talking about they're deploying everything in Kubernetes and all that good stuff. But I saw the other day there was this company that raised $67 million, and they're in the business of Kubernetes. But do you know what they do? They do troubleshooting for Kubernetes. So apparently Kubernetes is so easy that you need $67 million of round A for developing a company and a solution to do that. So anyway, my point here is that if you are in the business, if you as a user, as a customer, as a partner, it doesn't matter. If you're in the business of managing multiple infrastructure touch point, right? Or multiple, for the sake of this conversation, multiple Kubernetes distributions or flavors. I think that this is something, as an IT pro, you should think about how do you actually mask this from the developers? Because, I'll just speak from my own personal experience. I also have developer background, but more than me, my wife, she's also a Java developer, and I talk to her about this type of stuff. And she's like, I don't care. It's like, I don't care. And that's exactly my point. And I think that when you're starting to enable capabilities in an automated fashion without you need to spin brain cycles on it as a developer, I think this is where you're going to start seeing, I think we as Microsoft are going to start seeing more and more adoption, but you as the customer, I think that, or the partner, I think this is where you're going to start to see value for money very fast, because when you're unblocking, when you're simplifying the world of developers, it directly impacts the world of IT professionals. And I also think that it's vice versa. When you're simplifying the management capabilities, the operational capabilities, when you are Arc enabling either servers or Kubernetes clusters, and you are, like going back to your original point there, Jeff, when you're freeing up the time to do other things that makes more sense or better use of your time, this is where things are starting to click. But that's really where the biggest challenge is, because those two worlds are, historically speaking, never been part of each other's agenda in the sense of drinking coffee together and talking about stuff. And I think with the movement of, what is DevOps and what are site reliability engineers and all that, those worlds are starting to mesh more and more.
Yes.
And the result, the technologies that are being developed are also addressing that.
Yeah. You've raised some excellent points there, and I want to dive into one, because you've mentioned tons of new services that you can potentially unlock and use moving to hybrid. But let's face it, when you're introducing, say, Azure or Kubernetes or anything new, there's a cost, whether it be a hidden cost to the people who are using it, learning how to use it and being comfortable how to use it, because they've got to figure out how to deploy it, how to secure it, how to patch it or deal with outages or DR and all of that. So
right.
I think that's something that people have to sometimes consider, because I think the story is hybrid's great. You can unlock things really fast. You know, your developers can suddenly develop really fast and not care about where it goes to. But there's that learning cost, that kind of hidden cost of being able to use these new services. Do you see that as an issue where people run towards hybrid, but they haven't really learned how to use some of these services, and it ends up being a mess?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And Jeff, do you mind if I'll take this one for a second?
Go, Lior, go.
All right. So I think that let's just put things there in the right order. There's always going to be a learning curve. Doesn't matter if it's a technology that is cloud related. Doesn't matter if it's a car or a truck or an airplane. Doesn't matter. There's always going to be a learning curve. Okay. We can't put like a bunch of sprinkles on top of that, because that's just the reality. We're humans. We need to learn. That's how things work. Okay. So that's one. But if I'm taking this to the conversation that we're having, and specifically where Azure Hybrid fits into that question, if there is one thing that I always like to say that Arc is really separate itself from the other technologies that are out there, is the fact that it was designed with operational mindset in mind. What does that mean? It means that, and I'll give a couple of examples, okay? It means that, let's just take Azure Arc enabled servers, for example. If you have Azure VMs today, and you're invested in those VMs, you're invested in Azure, and you're doing, doesn't matter, Azure Monitor, Key Vault, Log Analytics, doesn't matter, Defender. You have a certain kind of rundown of the things that you know, things that you need to learn, practices that you're following, okay? So you have those as well. Now, if you're taking Azure Arc enabled servers, and those servers by definition are not running in Azure, right? But we are Arc enabling them. So those have now representation in our own API, Azure Resource Manager. You can take advantage of the same operational aspects that you have today on those servers. So that saves some time. I mean, at the end of the day, when you are seeing, it all boils down if you're seeing the same interface, right? Forget about the technology, forget about the nerd knobs for a second. It all starts with the interface, right? If you are, talking to me on Sunday and you're talking to me on Monday, you know that you're talking to the same person. But all of a sudden, if I'll bring someone else, oh, okay, so that's a different person, so I need to talk to him different language maybe. Take this to the Azure Arc space, right? You have the same language that you need to speak as an operator with an Azure VM and an Azure Arc enabled servers. Are all the capabilities are there? Not yet. We're getting there, right? But that's exactly the direction. So that's one example. Another example, if I'll take it to the Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes space for a second, okay? That extensibility model that I was referring to, right? The fact that you can light up those capabilities, GitOps, Key Vault, Open Service Mesh, right? All this stuff. We're actually bringing that to AKS. Currently it's in preview, but we're bringing that to AKS. So if you're familiar with AKS add-ons, right? Those will be kind of moving over to the extensibility model, and you're going to have those extensions. Now you have the same operational model for the extensibility layer. The containers are still the same containers, right? The application is still the same application, right? Doesn't matter if an application is running on AKS, GKE, EKS, Tanzu, doesn't matter. But how do you actually light up the capabilities that are enabling your developers? That's where the money lies. And that's where the differences between the different solutions that are out there. And I think this is where the learning curve that you're referring to, Sarah, is where things are starting to maybe just minimizing those gaps, bit by bit. So that's my observation on this.
Lior, I think you nailed it. And one thing to go with Sarah's observation and your comment about learning, here's the other thing to keep in mind. As someone looking at your own career and trying to figure out how to manage your own CV and your resume going forward, you want to make sure you have the right learnings, the right certifications, the right building blocks in your resume to make you more valuable.
And the right LinkedIn connections.
Yeah, yes. And you also want to make sure that those things that you're doing is not throwaway. And that's why Azure Hybrid is so important. Because if you are learning how to monitor, patch, manage, lifecycle management, manage your Kubernetes, and you're learning how to do that in Azure and on premises, now that's literally universal. I can manage Kubernetes running in Google. I can manage Kubernetes running in Amazon. I can manage it on premises. I can manage in all of these different places. So management is one aspect. So all of a sudden now you have the ability to manage truly the entire digital state.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, you also have the ability, and this is a part that, again, I think we've got to get better about telling this message, is you can also deliver cloud services on premises. So let's not forget, Kubernetes can be used obviously for customers building new applications, maybe modernizing some older Windows and Linux stuff, old Java.NET, putting it in containers and modernizing it. But it's also about bringing Azure services on-prem. And one of my favorite ones is SQL managed instances. Because if you look at SQL managed instances up in Azure, it's almost magic what's going on there. You basically take your database, you point it to the SQL managed instance. You don't manage the OS. There's nothing to patch. We handle all of that for you. Do you need to scale up, scale out, scale in, scale down, whatever? Do you want to automate that? I mean, it's a service. We handle managing SQL and the OS, and all of that is invisible. You just care about the database. And customers that try that go, whoa, I'm saving so much time. Again, my team doesn't have to do lifecycle management for that stuff, so they can work on other things that are important to the business. And then again, just like Kubernetes, someone will say, gosh, I wish we had it for these databases that need to stay on-prem. Well, that's what we're doing with SQL managed instances. These run on-prem, and we're giving you those Azure services as well. So, this hybrid message that we're talking about, it's a really all-encompassing. It's not just management. It's not just control plane. It's not just Kubernetes, but it's also bringing cloud services to be able to run in these distributed environments. And that's what is so exciting, I think, about what's going on in the hybrid space at Microsoft.
Yep.
Okay, absolutely. Now, I think Lior mentioned it when he was talking about lighting up DevOps in the hybrid era. Now, I want to dive into that because surely doing hybrid where you have some things in the cloud and you have things on-prem and potentially different architectures or different services is going to make DevOps more complicated. Is that the case? What do you think, Derek? Does that make DevOps easier or more complicated, or is it just a learning curve that you'll get over? Like, where does that sit? Where do they two things sit?
I've been there. Like that's it. It's funny. I've actually been there when I didn't have I had on-premise servers in the past, and so I would host it on Azure apps. And the thing is so I could never actually be 100% sure, because my idea of hybrid was, hey, I have a test box and some bits here that I can throw some bits on, and hopefully when I push up to Azure, it works. So with that, obviously not when you look back, you're like, oh, that wasn't great. But the thing is like that, for the most part, it worked, right? It definitely adds a complexity to it, because what you're deploying to in production and what you're using in dev and test, because it's like, obviously when you're dev, it's everyone's got different OSs. Oh, but it works on my machine. Oh, don't even start me on that. So I can see Jeff's heard that one before as well. So I think, to be honest, I think when bringing it on premise, where your hybrid is actually that when your on premises is more like cloud, that is definitely going to make things so much easier, because ultimately, like Jeff was saying, you're talking the same language, right? I've got it on premise, I can have an app service and then also then push it out. So there's things there that it's definitely going to, it started off in a bad spot, but definitely, with everything there and having the same language, then ultimately it's going to lead to this, basically everything being deployed to the same type of infrastructure, which is going to make things a lot easier, and which is going to reduce your costs, because ultimately the amount of times that you would get there, you get to production and blow up, you would maybe even do blue-green deployments, but it would never actually get to green, right? It'd be too late. So yeah, I think ultimately from here, if you're on premise and your cloud is the same, then really you're going to have the same DevOps practices and methodologies, which is going to make everything easier for everybody, Sarah.
Yeah,
I think that you need the connection point there. I mean, like it's not just about having those infrastructure types and Arc enable those infrastructure types. I think that specifically for continuous integration and delivery pipelines, there is one thing that I always found very interesting, in the sense of how do companies that are designing those pipelines, either, if you're in shop and you're doing this in-house and you're doing some, some funky stuff with Jenkins and you have your own thing going on, that's okay. Or if you're using some sort of a, SaaS provider or third-party solution, doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is that, to me, it was always about how do I take the same thing and make it repeatable? How do I not change? Like, I don't want to have custom-made paint for each and every house that I'm going. And I think that specifically with this notion of how do you enable GitOps, for example, with Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes, that's not enough. If you're adding the policy-driven on top of that, or the policy-driven approach on top of that, and you are standardizing, here are all my Git repositories that I'm listening to, and these are the ones that are used for this service. Here are all the ones that are used for this service, and this represent my production. And you know what? It's not just my production. I also have traffic policy shaping, or I have RBAC control, right? And once you're starting to assemble all these different repositories and various pipelines for those repositories, that's okay. But if you don't have something that govern that in a way that actually makes sense, that thing will fall apart like a house of cards, like just like that. And I think these are the things that, again, I find very interesting while talking to customers specifically about this type of scenarios. How do they handle that? So again, just wanted to put some extra flavor to what you're saying there.
Consistency is key. Consistency is key. like your wife said, she doesn't care, honestly, where her apps are running. She doesn't, like you said, she doesn't care. As long as it runs and it's running well and it's performing well, she doesn't care.
It says the same, by the way, about the internet. Like, she doesn't care. She just wants me to make it work.
It's a valid point. It's a valid point, though, right? Like, they don't really care, right? That's our job.
And it's not that they're putting down or don't think that the IT folks are, it's just that they want to move, they want to get it done, push it out, and get to the next problem that they have to solve. Put yourself in their head for just a second, because they've got a list of bugs 100 miles long that they've got to go take care of, and so they want to get this done to get on to the next thing, or to work on the next new cool project. And so that consistency for on-prem and in the public cloud, when you can say, look, where are you pushing this app? Oh, well, my CI/CD pipeline is going to push one copy to Azure.
Awesome. So one thing we haven't touched on, and it's probably kind of the elephant in the room, is Windows Server and where it sits. Like, is Windows Server still relevant these days? I know I'm being flippant there, and I know Windows Server definitely is. When Windows Server 2022 came out, it was billed as being hybrid enabled. It was, unlocking a lot of hybrid capabilities. What does that actually mean, though? Was that a marketing term, or is there actually some benefits to running Windows Server 2022?
Oh no. So let me take a step back real quickly for a second, so I can kind of explain it, because this has also been, after Azure Arc, the next most common question I get is, can you explain to me what the relationship is between Windows Server and Azure Stack HCI? Because I hear you talking about a lot about Azure Stack HCI and all the stuff that you're doing with Hyper-V and storage and networking, and in Windows you're talking about containers and things like that. Real quickly, 2009, 2010, right around this time, a whole bunch of customers, well, not a whole bunch, but a number of very loud vocal customers basically said, Microsoft, you're moving too slow. You release Windows Server every 2 to 3 years. Well, those open source guys, they're releasing a Linux kernel like every 5 minutes. What's the matter with you guys? You guys are too slow. You're terrible. You're behind the times. And so a bunch of journalists and web folks and pundits got out there and started writing, Microsoft's slow, Microsoft doesn't know how to deliver an OS anymore, yada, yada, yada. So we delivered 2008 R2, we delivered 2012, 2 to 3 years later, it was like 2.5. And so we finally, I sat in on a number of those escalations with my boss, my VP at the time, and I kept hearing this over and over. And so guess what we did in 2012 R2? We released it 11 months later. We said, fine, you want it fast? Here it comes. Boom, 11 months later. I remember still to this day sitting in my office in Building 43 with my hands behind my head in my seat, thinking, folks are going to be like so thrilled. They're going to put us up on their shoulders and they're going to carry us around the next conference because they're going to be so excited that we got this in 11 months. I couldn't believe. I was like high-fiving people. Guys, we got it. We did a 2012 R2 in 11 months. Guess what happened? Everybody was furious. It was like, what? No. Everybody, we got 10 times the amount of volume from folks saying, look, we just deployed our new SQL, our new Exchange, our new SharePoint, and you just came out with an R2 release 11 months later. Are you crazy? So we learned something very valuable here. We learned that there's a sweet spot for Windows Server. It's you release it every 2 to 3 years. So we released after 2012 R2, guess what? 2.5 years later, 2016. 2.5 years later, 2019. 2.5 years later, 2022. Spoiler alert, the next version of Windows Server will probably be 2 to 3 years later. Oh, there's an exclusive for you. So you can tell everybody right now. Now, on the other side of it, there's a different challenge which we have, which is our hardware folks. Processors, flash storage, network adapters, so all of this stuff is moving really, really quickly. Those are the people that say, you know what, we need it faster than every 2 to 3 years. And people realize, you know what, CPUs are changing, core counts are rising. We've gone, we have NVMe, we have crazy storage, crazy flash. So guess what? What we've done is we've basically said, look, Windows Server, that's for your apps, that's for your SQL, that's for your SharePoint, it's for your Exchange, it's for all of those line of business apps, those millions, tens of millions of Windows servers out there running, it's for all those apps. And for the infrastructure side, guess what? Azure Stack HCI, the first release was 20H2. The second release was Azure Stack HCI 21H2. Gosh, I wonder when the next release will be. And the reason why is because we need to stay in lockstep with what's going on the infrastructure hardware side. We are going to see more core counts rise, even faster, storage. We're seeing PCIe Gen 5. We're seeing faster NICs. We're seeing, we're working very closely with our network partners on terabit network adapters. Crazy mind-blowing stuff. That can't wait 3 years. And so the way to think about it is, hey, Windows Server is what it's always been. It's our fantastic application platform. It's for your domain control, your file servers, your print servers, your SQL, your Exchange, your SharePoint, all those apps you're continuing to run, whether on the cloud or on premises. And Azure Stack HCI is where we're putting our mojo behind the infrastructure because we can innovate on a rapid release cycle. And here's the last cool point. As I mentioned, the last version of Azure Stack HCI is 21H2. Last time I checked, over 90% of our customers are on 21H2 because it's a free over-the-air update. It's just like, you get an update on your iPhone, you click update, and boom, you're patched to the next release. Azure Stack HCI is just like that. So 21H2, just download it, boom, there it is. Gosh, when the next release comes out, it'll be just like that. So I hope that kind of explains that.
Awesome. We're kind of nearing the end of the session. I suppose we could talk for hours on this subject and dive into lots of different areas, but there's a couple of questions I want to make sure we squeeze in before we do wrap up. This one's for you, Lior. What's the best way to get started using hybrid and looking at Azure Arc? Where can we go to find out some more information?
Yeah, so the obvious answer to this will be go to Docs. But as you know, I'm not giving obvious answers to questions. About hybrid is a very interesting space in that sense because it's moving so fast. Like Jeff mentioned that, and there's so much going on, especially in the Arc space where the amount of capabilities is just enormous. And about 2.5 years ago, we started a project. It was the first time that we actually started something like that, and that project called Azure Arc Jumpstart. The Azure Arc Jumpstart is really a community-driven open source project that was designed to fill the gaps for folks that are maybe coming from an Azure background, but maybe don't have the strong background on the other platforms. And the reason that we created this, not just to give them that, but also making sure that we're bridging those gaps of knowledge, because Azure Arc, by definition, touches everything that is outside of Azure. That's kind of the core value proposition. But if you go to our docs, for example, we're not going to tell you how to spin up a GKE cluster. We're not going to tell you how to spin up an EKS cluster. You can do that yourself, or we're not going to tell you, hey, here's the things that you need to consider by automating a Tanzu cluster. So what we did, to bridge that gap, we created the Azure Arc Jumpstart. And the Azure Arc Jumpstart really as of today, covers more than 100 scenarios, automated scenarios to spin up environments that are Arc-enabled across the board with all Arc technologies, servers, VMware, Kubernetes, data services, machine learning, app services, really the breadth of Azure Arc. And it also has a project, or we should say a product inside the Jumpstart called RBox, which really encapsulate a lot of these scenarios into a single unified deployment unit. And that's RBox. In addition to that, in addition to the Azure Arc Jumpstart, the last piece of source of knowledge that I would recommend people to go is that if you're looking to understand how to do this at scale, if you want to understand, okay, how does that really relate to, for example, Cloud Adoption Framework, we actually started to release accelerators or Azure Arc enabled X landing zone accelerators for these Azure Arc technologies. We released back in January, we released servers. And, spoiler, watch out for build next week when we're going to release something new. I wonder. But these accelerators are really designed to bring you up to speed with how to do things the right way. It's been developed by our own experts, by our field product, and it's been battle tested, and it has reference automations. So these are the 3 sources of knowledge that I would recommend people to go and get started with.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned build, and we're about a week away from build. What sessions should we be looking out for at build? Are either of you speaking, or any hints?
I think Jeff is doing like 4. Jeff, how many do you have?
No, actually, I have none in build. I've got a bunch of other conferences I'm working on, but trust me, I know we've got. I was looking through the schedule and looking through the sessions, and it's really across the board. There are tremendous sessions.
I will, Jeff. I will mention a couple of those, right?
Please do.
Shameless plug. Not that I'm shameless or anything, but BRK11, BRK22, BRK11 will talk about cloud native applications, not just in the context of hybrid. That's going to be an awesome session on the new things that are coming with AKS, new things that are coming in the open source space with Azure. And also, obviously, it's going to focus more on Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. So definitely go and watch that. We also have a follow-up with Ask the Experts that I'm going to attend after this session. And BRK22 will focus on hybrid and will focus on Azure Arc and data services specifically. We're going to put a lot of emphasis there, but also obviously we're going to cover all the foundations and the building block, and like the previous one, another Ask the Experts that will follow up with this one. And obviously there are many more. The schedule builder is already up and running. Just search for hybrid or Azure Arc. And you'll find
ton of content.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much all for your time. It's been fascinating. Like I said, I could talk for hours about this subject. It's such a interesting one. But thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. And thank you to everybody that tuned in. This video will be available on demand. So if you want to go back and watch anything, then it'll be available right after we end the stream. So fantastic there. And yeah, hope to see you all at Build, folks. Thank you again.
Thanks for having us.